Okay, so I had the question, how do you thicken lines? How do you thin lines? So with this kind of extra layer of these hatched tonality marks that I did, I'm going to show you how I can thin them or how I can thicken them. Thickening them is easier. So I'll first show you that. You select them all. Because they're all done with the blob brush, they're a black fill with no stroke. I'm going to add a black stroke to them. So I simply click on the stroke and then I add it. I don't know why it went white all of a sudden, but I can change that. Just click black. There we go, and OK. And now under properties, I can thicken that stroke. Right? And I can click off of it and I can see. So that would be thicker. And you can do half points too. This is kind of more advanced Illustrator. If you click on the stroke options, you can do the stroke on the inside or on the outside. And you can play with how it corners. So sometimes it will spike out at corners. There's all kinds of things. So that's how you would thicken. But before you would be finished, you would have to do this. So notice that's with the stroke. That's thicker. If I turn the stroke, I have to select it first. But if I turn the stroke off, that will show what it is without the stroke. Right, like that. Turn the stroke back on. Yeah, I think that's actually fine. So I'll incorporate that stroke, that thicker line. So now how do I make that permanent? I don't want to have any strokes in my vector line art because strokes scale differently because they're an attribute of the vector rather than the vector itself. So what do I need to do? I need to select them all the things that show a stroke, and then I need to go to Object, Path, Outline the stroke. And when I do that, it turns all those individual strokes, it's pretty complicated, into their own fill paths. So now all those lines, which were just single paths, are now groups that have not just the line, but also the stroke around them as a secondary fill path. And if I wanted to merge all that together, I would simply use Pathfinder, have them all selected, then go to Pathfinder, which you can find under Window, Pathfinder, but I like to keep it right here. And I would merge them all together. So now they're simple lines again. But no strokes. You don't want any strokes when you're ready to finish your line art as a vector. And this is the only one that didn't get pathfinded, but that's fine. So I'll just, there we go. Now what if I wanted to thin them? Well, I'm just going to show it with one. So let's say I wanted to make this line thinner. So I'll use my small selection tool and I'll thin it out. I'm going to do the exact same technique, but I'm going to do a white stroke instead, just so you can see what I'm doing. Let's make that pretty thick under Properties so you can see it clearly. So I'm going to really thin that line out. Okay. Now what I have to do is I have to outline the stroke, Object, Path, Outline Stroke. Then, while they're both selected, you can see it under Layers. There's this and this. You see how they're both selected? Then I minus the top from the bottom, and that will thin it out. And that gives me a little willowy line there. Now, if you do that to the whole thing, undo here. So if I take my whole line art other than those stripes, right? And if I add a stroke to it, and play with making it bigger. I don't know why it's defaulting to white first, even though I choose black. But there we go. We can see how it thickens everything. And then if I turn that off, it gets back to normal. So you can play with that. It's a little bit harder to do the make a stroke of white and then subtract that white stroke after you've made it into a fill path from the one behind it, but sometimes that is necessary. And actually, I'll ask you guys, do you think it's better this way or this way? Yeah, sometimes thicker can be better. Now, I'm going to even be a little extra, even more. And so when you do the stroke, look what can happen. Like I can get little shards like that. That's coming from the stroke path. So what I can do even before I outline the strokes, right, is I can use the stroke properties. And on the stroke, click it, and I can say I want to round the corners. You see how it's starting to affect it? Let's see. I thought that would get rid of that spike, but that spike's doing something else. And you can also do it on the outside, right? And you can even adjust the point size with decimals. So I can try like 2.2, right? You can really dial it in for your thickness. But I got to figure out where that line is coming from. It's coming from some corner. It's only because of the stroke. And so to ultimately have control of it, I need to make them fill paths again. So I'm going to make it a little thinner because I don't like how close all of these are getting. So let me select it all. Go to properties. The stroke I am going to make into, let's try 0.8. There we go. And then I'm going to play with the stroke properties. I'm going to round the corners. Good. So before I finish it off, and I outline all those strokes, and good, that got rid of the spike. I just made it small enough so that spike didn't happen at the change. I can select individual things like this and just turn the stroke off just for those. So if, like the flames, I don't think I want the stroke on. I think I want that to be a little bit thinner. So I just turn the stroke off. And the outside flames, turn the stroke off. Turn the stroke off. And then for these, the stars, I don't want to have the stroke. Turn them off. And for the freckles, I don't want to have the stroke. Turn them off. But for everything else, maybe for the, yeah, no, I do. All right, so now some things have strokes, some things don't have strokes. So when I select it all, you can see that now it shows question marks in the strokes because sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. So I select it all, and then I go to Object, Path, Outline the stroke. And now there's no stroke anywhere, right? And it's all become kind of flattened. And then if I want to be extra clean about it, I'm just going to merge everything. So now it's all in one place. This is my line art as one clean vector. Right? Only black, no white. How do I check it? I can select it all, move it off onto the gray. I see no white shapes, I'm good, and I see no strokes. So now I'm going to save it. I'm finally done. So I'm going to say save. That's going to be my AI file, my working vector file. Then I'm going to say File, Save As, or Save a Copy. Either works. And I'm going to make an EPS version. I'm going to do it to the desktop. That EPS is a transferable vector format that will work for Photoshop. And then just for myself, I'm going to make an SVG version, which will work for things like Photopea and other programs. That's the most standard vector format. And it will work in Photoshop too, but EPS just works a little bit cleaner without the headaches. So here's my EPS. I'm going to mark that purple or violet for vector. And I think I just saved my SVG to my folder. Yeah. So my SVG is in my folder there. but I'll go ahead and show you how to save one to your desktop. SVG at the very bottom to the desktop, Command D. And that's also going to be violet. So you'll have 3 vector file formats for your black line art. And that's all we're doing with Illustrator, is making the black line art. So there's my SVG. Wait, where did my EPS go? There it is. Interesting that the SVG here is also not showing a preview. Usually it does. But I'm not worried about it. All right, so now what am I going to do? Now I need to color my image. So I go back to Photoshop. I can quit Illustrator. It's saved, and it's saved as an AI file. So if I ever wanted to work on the vector line art, I have it here. That's everything. So now I'm going to open Photoshop, and I'm going to say File New. Remember, you don't want to open vector files in Photoshop, or it forces you to rasterize them. But what you can do is drag and drop them in, keep them as smart objects. And I'm going to use this sizing. I'm going to actually not do 8 by 10. I'm going to go a little bit bigger because we're going to use these as a spot illustration for posters next, right? And posters are bigger than 8 by 10. So I'm going to make it 14 inches wide by 11 inches tall. That's because my illustration is more landscape format. But I would recommend something around 11 by 14 by 350 pixels per inch. And then I'm going to name it with my name, Assignment 5. And this will be Unicorn. And this will be my coloring. You know, it's my spot illustration coloring. So I'm going to create that new file. And you can see it in the bottom left-hand corner of Photoshop. 14 inches by 11 inches by 350. If yours is taller than it is wide, you will use 11 by 14 instead of 14 by 11. And now I'm going to drag and drop the EPS, because that's the one that's Adobe's transferable vector format that works really well between Adobe programs. And I'm going to drag and drop it in, just like we did with your graphic symbols in the last projects. And then I'm just going to make sure it looks comfortable on there. This isn't for printing, this is for coloring. And then I hit return, and you'll see it's a nice smart object, and I have a white background. Now we're ready for coloring. Coloring, we set it up as a sandwich. So digital coloring is a very particular discipline. It's a good entry-level job for digital artists. And the files have to be set up correctly. Okay? Whereas digital painting, you can do whatever you want. Right? Digital coloring has to keep the black line art on the top. It's like a sandwich. So I'm going to demonstrate this by making this top layer with my line art gray. And I want you to think of this as black bread. Right? I was just in New Braunfels over the weekend. There's a great clay festival there. I went to a German restaurant for lunch. They served black bread, right? Schwarzbrot, right? And you're going to think of the bottom, I'm going to rename it as blank white. And I want you to think of this as white bread. And I'm going to lock it. And I'm also going to lock the black bread. Right? So now we have a sandwich with like white Wonder Bread at the bottom, black German bread at the top, and we're going to make a digital coloring sandwich. Now the most basic kind of sandwich is just cheese, right? Like a grilled cheese sandwich. So I'm going to mark this layer yellow for cheese, right? But what is cheese? What is the basic ingredient that all digital coloring has? It's what's called flatting. Flatting is crazy colors. We can even find them. Like really, really bold colors. I'll use the pastels. There we go. Those are some good flatting colors. And they're just dropped in everywhere, kind of randomly, as long as each color is distinct, because it makes selecting the areas easier. This is professional practice. This is called flatting. I'm going to show you how we can skip this step, but I want you to know about it, right? So how do I do it? This is how I do it. I never want to accidentally rasterize my line art, but as a great shortcut, I can make a duplicate of it, and I can rasterize the duplicate, right? Then I'm going to move it underneath. And then on that, I'm going to use my paint bucket, and I'm going to hold down Option to select a color. So let's do the body pink.